Well, good morning. My name is Jared Patrick. I serve as one of the pastors here. I'm really excited that I get to open God's Word with you this morning in Matthew chapter 5. As we continue on in our series, This Is Us, being outwardly focused. I want to say, sometimes I've said things from here and I regret it, but I'm going to go ahead and just put this out there. If you would like to come to the second service, there might be some more seats there. If you want to do it. The problem when I say that is all of you are going to be like, you know what, I'm going to do that. And then if you all show up, so I don't know how we're going to do this, whatever. So let's just figure that out. Okay, I don't have much time. I want to invite some friends up here in just a minute, so I'm going to try to unpack Matthew chapter 5. Whenever I was a new believer back in 2005, going into 2006, I began asking a question that most people ask early on in their faith. It's more of a rhetorical question, and I think it's a question I want you to consider just for a minute when it comes to your faith. The question that I asked was this: if the goal of the Christian life is just to get to heaven, then why doesn't God just take us there the moment we're saved? So if the goal of the Christian life is just to get to heaven, which is the goal, right? That he saves us for eternity. But if the goal is just that, then why wouldn't God just save us immediately and take us straight to heaven? Another question, you can kind of go down deep into all of it, but let's say, what if the ultimate goal of the Christian life is just to come together on Sunday mornings? Like, is the goal of the Christian life to come sing some songs, listen to a guy talk? Like, if that's the goal, wouldn't it be better for God just to take us to heaven? Because I would imagine I'd rather listen to Jesus preach than me, right? Or I'd rather listen to not that I have anything against me or the band, but like heaven, like could you imagine the band there, right? Or serving in kids ministry, I would imagine it's better to serve in kids ministry in heaven than it is here, right? I don't know why, but right, like just be a little bit better. Why wouldn't God just take us to heaven? As we look at our family traits, one of the things that we believe is that we are called to be outwardly focused. As we've looked at our 5 family traits, the way we considered it was if you line my family up right here and you looked at us, you'd probably say, okay, that makes sense, they're Patrick's. Just kind of, you could tell by the way, not only the mannerisms, but the way they looked, you could just tell they're a family. Whenever we look at the Bridge Fellowship, it was our desire that these 5 things would be evident in our lives, personally and corporately. Last week, we talked about being Christ-centered, that literally our lives would be centered on Christ. Not just our lives, but corporately as a church, that we would be centered on Christ, not centered on programs or personalities. That's when churches can go really weird. We are centered on Christ. This is his church. We are his people. And so what Paul does in Colossians chapter 3 is he says, here's the secret to living a Christ-centered life. We seek and we set. He says we seek the things above. We set our minds on things above. So we ask the question, are we looking above or around? In most of our lives, we simply look around us, and that's where we find all of our identity. But what Paul is saying, to live a Christ-centered life is to set our minds and seek the things above. And whenever we have our minds situated there, everything changes. When our minds and our hearts are going eternal perspective, not temporal perspective, everything changes. But then whenever our hearts are right on the eternal, the temporal all of a sudden makes sense. That we are here for a purpose. We are here for a reason. And so when we seek and we set, we all of a sudden take our minds away from the things around us initially onto the things above us, and then we can focus on the things around us. And so that's being Christ-centered. So hopefully that's the foundation that all of us are right here on this foundation. We are seeking and setting the things above, not the things around. And because of that, then all of a sudden the question, why doesn't God just take us to heaven, makes a little bit more sense. Here's Jesus' words, Matthew chapter 5. Let me give you a little bit of context if you don't know. Matthew chapter 5, 6, 7. This is the Sermon on the Mount. Most agree that this is Jesus' famous sermon, that most likely he would go from village to village and teach this same sermon. It was just a one sermon deal. It would be awesome, right? But here we are, 7 days a week. He goes to each village looking at different things. He would just talk about the kingdom of God. And he would start, and as he does in Matthew chapter 5, with what's called the Beatitudes. And the very first one is so important. If you want to know more about it, we did a whole series on the Sermon on the Mount, 2 years ago. But the first words are really important. He says, blessed are the poor in spirit. And It's really interesting language when he says, blessed are the poor in spirit. It's not that it's sort of this meek, like walk over me. It's, I know I'm poor in spirit. I know that I desperately need something outside of me to save me, that I can't save myself. Blessed are the poor in spirit. So then when that happens, everything else flows from it. He talks throughout the rest of the Beatitudes, and then he gets to Matthew chapter 5, verse 14. This is what he says. We're looking at 3 verses, but here's Jesus' words. I'm going to talk through 4 of them, and we'll just explain it. He goes this. Here's what he says. I said he goes this. I'm sorry. I'm still working on seminary, y'all. Okay. You are the light of the world. Okay. Jesus starts here. You are the light of the world. Consider that statement just for a minute. What an incredible thought. That I am the light of the world. Why is it such an incredible thought? Here's what I think. Because we think so poorly of ourselves. Think about how we think about ourselves and think about how our culture talks about us or you or people. We live in a culture that demeans, that devalues, that criticizes, that judges harshly. And Jesus tells us who we are. We need to be reminded of who we are. We are the light of the world. Jesus says, you are the light. Here's what that means for all of us, whether you're a 6th grader all the way to however old you are in this room. You have a purpose. It doesn't matter what you're feeling. It doesn't matter if the culture is telling you lies all around you. You have a purpose. God has called you to do something, and it is to be the light of the world. So here's the reality. You have to ask the question, well, what does light do? If we are the light of the world, what is the purpose? What does light do? It's very simple. Light pushes back the darkness. Light pushes back the darkness. That you and I were called on this planet for a reason, and that is to push back the darkness. Now, we all know that the man's greatest need is a spiritual need. We know that our biggest need is spiritual in nature, that we desperately need something outside of us to save us, to reconcile us, to make us new. That's the most important thing, the gospel. But we do see throughout Scripture that as we step into a broken, dark world, we are bringing the light of Jesus to expose the darkness all around us, which is sin. That everything around us is broken because of sin, back in Genesis chapter 3, and we are the light to go expose that darkness, to push back the darkness, that we are to push back actively the darkness. So you are the light of the world. Theologically, you have to think of it this way. It's actually not your light, it's his light in you. It's not that you're awesome and you have so much to give. It's his light in you that goes out. It's a reflection. Like if you ever want to think about it, just how bright is my light? Just take your children on a trip to Colorado in the car for 12 hours. Like you're gonna shine pretty bright for about an hour, but come Junction, right? It's like, whoa, that light got dim. See, it's not a light in you. It's the light of Jesus in and through you. Think about it, the sun, right? The sun shines the light. We are the moon. We don't have anything in us that's just awesome, but we reflect the sun's light everywhere around us, right? It's heat, it's warmth. This is what the light does. There's 2 types of light. We are a reflection of that light. The question I have to ask over and over today, are you shining for Christ? Like, doesn't it feel elementary? Like we're in kids' church, but isn't such a great question to ask? If Jesus says, you are the light of the world, the question you have to ask is, am I reflecting his light around me? Here's what he goes on. I love what Jesus says. Here, he tends to teach in illustrations. This is a great one. He says, a city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. That if there is a city on top of a hill, it cannot be hidden. Speaking of Colorado, my family and I were able to go to Telluride this summer. And we got to spend some time up there. Some friends of us let us use their house, which is really the only way we can afford to get there. But like we go stay in this house. But you get down to Telluride, and just raise your hands if you've been to Telluride. Let me see. Okay. So this is my first time there, my family's first time there. We get there, and Telluride is down in what's called, I think, Box Canyon. But there are 3 sides of Telluride that's down in this thing. So you look to your right, there's a huge mountain right there. You look that way, there's a huge mountain right there. You look that way, there's a huge mountain right there. And that's way is like freedom, I don't know. But so like you're looking at this in Telluride, and on that mountain right there, there's Bridal Falls coming off to the right. And then if you look just further in the distance, there's this waterfall coming down. And this waterfall is spectacular. Like if it kind of felt like Truman Show kind of situation, that it just doesn't feel real. It's just that spectacular. But here's what happened. Every time I would walk out of a store, walk out of a shop or whatever, my eyes would immediately go to the waterfall. That it was just like, it kind of like a laser beam just right there to that waterfall. I couldn't help but look at it. That's what Jesus is saying here is we are like a city on a hill and it cannot be hidden. That people would look to us and say there is something different about them. There is something going on with them. The way they love Jesus and love the people around them, I can't help but just look at them at a minimum. Here's how Spurgeon said it. I loved how he said this. Christ has given us light that we might enlighten the world. God intends his grace to be as conspicuous as a city built on a mountain's brow. As conspicuous as a city, he's using humor here, obviously, that we should be looking out over the culture. And people should be looking at us, seeing the aroma, smelling the aroma of Christ. There is something about us that we are shining bright for him. Oftentimes in church history, if you look through it, we get this wrong. We go towards a side of monasticism, which would mean like monk life. And so there's this idea of, well, for me to live a holy life, for me to live a life set apart for God, I'm gonna separate myself from the culture. Now, let's be honest. I've thought about it, right? When I watch CNN, Fox, I'm like, 18 acres would be good. I'll churn my own butter. It'll be great. Like, let's get off the grid, right? That's what I watch on YouTube is off the grid shows. Our faith might be personal, but it is not private. Yes, he saved me, he's reconciled me, he's made me new. But that is not so that I can sequester myself somewhere else so that nobody touches me or hurts me. I'm to step out into the darkness with the light of Christ. I'm not supposed to separate myself. I'm supposed to engage with the culture. So a city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. God did not redeem us and call us into his kingdom to hide us. He did not save us to be silent saints. He's called us for the good work. He's called us to be ambassadors for Christ. He's called us to go and do and share this good news. Here's what he says. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather a lamp on a lampstand, and it gives light for all who are in the house. Now, this doesn't necessarily make sense to us because we have electricity, right? And in this time, you didn't have electricity. And so, in these days, people would go to sleep at 7:30 at night because that's when the sun went down, and woke up at 4 a.m. because they, had their full hours of sleep. For us, it's not really that. We can turn lights on anytime we want. What he's saying here is a bit of humor that, okay, let's pretend, let's make it like this. Let's say you're renovating your house and you have a really cool view of the hill country and you put this really big window, right? What are those called? I'm trying to remember right now. Okay, you don't know either. So it's like really big window, right? It's what it's called. And let's say it's right there. It's showing you this whole view and all the lights coming in. And what you decide is it's just too bright. So I'm going to put the blackout curtains like you get for your kids so you can sleep. And so you just put those there for the whole time and you never open them. What he's saying is you have a light that's been given to you. Don't put something over it and hide it. I think what Jesus is doing here is so helpful because it's our natural tendency to hide. He goes all the way back to the garden. It's our natural tendency not to shine the light that others may see. It's our natural tendency. We want to put the basket over the light, or we want to put up the shades over the window. That's our natural tendency. For us, just kind of thinking through this, what are some baskets that keep us from shining the light for Christ? Like what might it be in our lives? I think there's 4. I'm just going to unpack these for a minute. I think 4 baskets that we might put over our light are these. Number 1, the fear of man. Do you think that the fear of man might keep you from shining brightly for Jesus? Can I be honest? I think this is a much bigger deal than we think. The fear of man. We live in a culture that if you step out just a little bit, like you might get canceled. You might say a couple of things and all of a sudden no one's gonna like you anymore, or your views are a little too extreme. We start walking into this weird season where I'm just gonna be quiet because I don't really want to engage and kind of deal with all that goes around it. There's a fear of man, and we have to consider this as believers. What can man do to us? Like, really? If Paul says it like this, for me to live is Christ, to die is gain, then quite honestly, what can man do to me? My eternity is secure. Why am I caring so deeply about what people around me who may not know the Lord might think about me shining my light? The thing that we step into in our culture is don't stand out, don't stand out, go with the flow, just look like everyone else. Turned a blind eye to what might be going around me that I just don't want to make waves. And if we're not careful, the fear of man might keep us from shining brightly for Jesus. Paul says, am I trying to win the approval of God or for man? This is a good question for us to ask. Is the fear of man really keeping me from shining brightly for Jesus? Number two, does pride keep you from shining brightly for Jesus? Is it pride in our hearts? I think there's two types of pride baskets. First, and I know some people like this, I might be that. I need somebody to tell me if I'm not. But you might think you're shining brightly, and you are. But the spotlight is on you and not him. Like, no one's prouder of everything you're doing than you. And you just kind of start looking around at what can I do to help others? But it's not necessarily to help them. It's so that I can get some more likes on the grams. Can I say the grams? I don't know. I'm officially an old man. The YouTubes. But is it pride in my heart that I'm doing these good works, not for the approval of God, but for the approval of man? That I just love people to tell me how awesome I am. That's pride. But what about the other side? You simply assume or hope that someone else will do the work. It's a consumeristic mentality of I know there's a lot that I should be doing, but I'm gonna just assume everyone else is gonna do it, right? Like I got things to do. So maybe pride is really keeping us from shining bright for Jesus. This is an interesting one. The third, does sin keep you from shining brightly for Jesus? And here's what I mean by this. If you think about it for a minute. When you step out and start living a life for Christ, others who've known you for a long time and know your sin patterns might start questioning, are you really living for Christ? And so all of a sudden, when you do step out, you will have to start living in vulnerability, honesty of who you really are, because others will take notice. And so oftentimes what sin does is it begins to isolate us, walk into shame, so we start stepping back, rather than stepping forward. And so sin can be one of those things that we isolate. The enemy can certainly use to isolate us, to move us to the side, to not fully live for Jesus. Is it sin? Fourth, what about comfort? Is it ultimately just comfort that keeps you from shining brightly for Jesus? Maybe we're far too distracted by all the shiny things of this world that we don't shine brightly for Christ. We have become a people who simply value the things of this world, the thing the world values, and have become indistinguishable from the things of this world. Like we think the same way. We act the same way. And so maybe comfort is I just want to stay here, not really step out. I need to tell you this, like the most loving thing I can tell you, when you start shining for Jesus, it will cost you something. And it's worth it. It will always cost us something and is worth it. So you think about time, talent, treasures. You start seeing the needs around you, spiritual and physical needs around you. You start stepping in to have conversations about the gospel, the real need, the ultimate need that everyone has, that we desperately need Jesus. And then we start seeing, okay, I can start meeting needs around me that might even open up doors that I can share the gospel with. It will cost you something. It will cost you relational equity, step into relationships. It will cost you time. It'll certainly cost you money. Start caring for the needy, the poor, the widows, the orphans, 100%. And that's what we're called to do. We are blessed to be a blessing. That's who we are as believers. So be careful of these four baskets. Is it fear of man? Is it pride? Is it sin? Is it comfort? Jesus goes on, in the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Here's how Jesus wraps this whole thing up. He says, in the same way, okay, if there's a city on a hill, if you're not covering our basket, let your light, the light that I've given to you, shine for others so that they may see your good works and give glory to God and your Father. Here's the question. How do you shine your light? This light that God's given to you, this light that's inside you, how do you shine it? Here's where it gets fun, honestly, so much fun as a church. How you shine Christ's light is as unique as your personality and location. How you shine Christ's light is as unique as your personality, like certain things that God has placed on your heart, certain things, these issues you see in the culture that you know you want to address that maybe not everybody else sees. Like it's as unique as your personality. What do you see around you? Start meeting needs and bring the gospel with you. Be careful. I'm just going to say this real quick because sometimes it get really weird if you just hang out on Twitter all the time. I'm not talking like social justice stuff, but we do step in and start helping needs. Like we're called to do that. One of my professors in seminary, he said, if all we do is just help people around us but don't take the gospel, then we're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Like we bring the gospel with us, but you would be foolish to say that we don't do any kind of helping of the people around us. That's what Jesus did. We start walking around, seeing needs, helping those around us, and certainly we know in our heart that the biggest need is a spiritual need. So as you consider your personality and location, like where do you work? What school are you in? What are hobbies you have? What are like interest groups on Facebook? Like you never know like where God's going to lead you in all of these things. What's your personality and location? And God begins to use you in those areas. I can't really tell you what to do, but I can tell you that you should do something, that we should be outwardly focused, that we should be called to shine the light. Here's the big question. Where is our world lit up because you are there? Like how is our world lit up, the light of Christ, because you are there? Because your faith might be personal. It is not private. We are called, the whole book of James, to do good works. And here's the important part. The light we give is the good works that we do. We are called by faith. Jesus has called us to do good works. We're to live out our faith. And it's not out of motivation that he would love us more. It's he's loved us so much, I can't help but go show everybody the good news of Jesus. To be outwardly focused. The question is, what is our motivation? Honestly, what is our motivation? The ultimate motivation that Jesus says is they would give glory to God, your Father in heaven. That if there's anything that we do, if there's any good in us, it is to point others to Jesus. As we meet needs, as we share the gospel, he is the reason, he is the object of glory, not you. We don't need you going around posting on Instagram and hashtag humble. Right? Like we go and love our neighbor. We build relationships. We start growing in this relationship with the people around us and we bring the gospel with us. So let's consider a question together. This might push you, challenge you a little bit, might have you pushed out of your comfort zone a little bit. But here's the question I want us to consider. Are you living a life that is compelling for an unbeliever? Your life right now, are you living a life that is compelling for an unbeliever? What if your time, talent, treasures, what if you stepped into some areas around you that just by having your presence there, you're bringing the light of Christ? And it may be places that I'll never get to. Maybe it's your work. Maybe it's some areas in our community that nobody else is looking at, that nobody sees, and all of a sudden you feel the burden, the need to step in and do something about it. See, good works are an overflow of a changed heart. That's the ultimate reality, is our good works are an overflow of a changed heart. So where is it in our hearts that sees the needs around us and we step into that to be outwardly focused? Where's our world lit up because you're there? Now let's be realistic for a minute, okay? When you begin to shine light in dark places, you're setting yourself up for things not to fit into your organized type A schedule box. And also, when we begin to shine the light in dark places, like darkness isn't really excited about the light. You'll step into some messy situations. You'll step into some areas that'll cost you something. It's not as great out there as we think that it is. And we're called to go reach people, all people, a gospel movement that would reach every person of the hill country, regardless of their circumstances, regardless of where they find themselves. That's what we're called to. So as you step into areas, it'll always be messy, but it's always worth it. Now, when it comes to just application, I want to introduce to you 3 people who are literally pushing back the darkness in our own area, in our own community. These are people that we've begun talking to over a year ago. We started looking at how can we partner with this crew, and we have now officially created our partnerships with these areas. Here's what I want you to think about as we step into this conversation. These are people who saw darkness and decided to be a light in those dark places. And so we as a church decided, okay, then we're going to step with them. They're doing a great job. We're going to step with them and partner with them. So what we've got as they come on, I have Rachel Russo, who's the co-founder of the Vault Fostering Community. This is Rachel. Everybody say, what's up, Rachel? No one's ever screamed for me. Not that you should, that's not what I'm saying. Okay, then we have Jennifer Smith, who's the executive director of the South Texas Alliance for Orphans. And then we have Agnes Hubbard, who's the executive director of Hill Country Daily Bread. Hey, Agnes. You look great. Okay, so what I want to do is have a conversation with them because they have seen darkness in our area, darkness that they've seen, and they decided to be light in those areas. And so this is what I was talking about. It's as unique as your personality, like in your location. So where God has placed you, bloom there. Find some light and shine it there. So I wanted to ask them, I got really just 2 questions I'm going to ask both of them. These stools are swiveling, and my ADD is kicking in. This is great. Okay, I'm going to ask them 2 questions. I want you to get to know them a little bit, but here's my ultimate goal. I want you to go from unaware to aware. You may not know what they're doing, so I want them to give a brief glimpse into what they're doing, and I'd really encourage you to go talk to them. They've got some tables outside. There's a website on that card you got in. I'd love to see some people who see a place. I'm going to shine the light there. So Rachel, question for you. How did you get into this, and what exactly do you guys do?
All right. Well, Vault Fostering Community is an organization that actually was birthed here in Boerne. I live in Boerne, and during a season where I was becoming a foster parent, or I was deciding if I would become a foster parent, and taking next baby steps in that process. And one of my concerns as a single foster parent was the financial aspect, or like what kind of investment I would have to make every time a child showed up in my home. And you get very little information about kids, and it is really fast. So it's like, hey, we'll be there in 30 minutes. And you're like, I have nothing. And so I thought, well, I could probably do this a couple of times, but I'm going to be tapped out after a few kids, you know? So financially, I was kind of concerned about that. And in conversations with people who helped us found and start Vault, there was this conversation of like, that's such a stupid reason for someone to not say yes to kids if that's your only barrier. And so that just kind of began a snowball effect of, well, why couldn't we have a place where people could come and get things and not have to pay for them? And so currently we are located in San Antonio. We were here for 5 years and then moved into San Antonio, kind of near Target. And we serve foster families. So foster families, kinship caregivers, anyone who has stepped up for a child who's displaced from their home because of CPS and an unsafe situation. And so kids and families can come to us. I mean, yesterday alone, we had requests for 5 kids ranging 4 months to 12 years old. It's on the daily. Kids are being removed from their homes and needing support in the community. And there's families sitting in this room who are saying yes to that. Very big yeses, and sometimes you get the call that there's one more. Can you make room for one more? And so we exist to be able to eliminate some of that barrier to saying yes. So we provide things like beds, car seats, all clothing, shoes, all those things immediately when those kids get placed in homes.
Awesome. Just quick, good job, Bridge Fellowship. I think
Yes.
it was last month I don't remember, 300 and...
I was trying to directly answer the question and not get off topic.
I am the
But
best
I wanted
at
to
time.
say, Can I say thank you?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you guys so much. Your church showed up. I mean, I'm just going to say bigger than any other church that showed up. Uh, that feels
Don't
good.
do
That
that,
feels
y'all.
good, right? But you guys provided, I think we gave you guys 350 tags and said, could you maybe do this? It's okay if you come short. And you guys showed up with 370 something pair of shoes.
job.
And the kids loved them. The smiles on faces and the tears on grandparents who came with 7 kids, and they didn't know how their kids were going to get new shoes. And they were able to receive that thanks to you guys showing up. So thank you.
Well, Rachel, you're shining a light in a dark place. Thank you for that. Jennifer Smith, tell us a little about you. How'd you get into this?
Yeah, so in 2005, God shined a light on a really dark place in our community. I read a newspaper article about a girl who'd been abused and neglected. Got put into foster care, was then abused and neglected in foster care, and was now aging out of the system. And what I would later find out, she had a really high likelihood of ending up homeless, sex trafficked, or pregnant, or all of the above. And frankly, it just made me really angry. So it was one of those places where all my passions, gifts, talents kind of just collided for me. And I was like, oh, God, you should do something. He's like, oh, yeah, you should. I was like, wasn't talking about me. So I prayed. You could hear argued with God for months about why my husband and I, who had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, should not be the ones stepping into this. We both had checked all the boxes for the American dream: house, 2 healthy kids, 2 upward moving careers. God just never let that go for me. And so we started foster classes at the end of 2005, started fostering in 2006. And what I didn't know is while I was arguing with God, there was a little girl who was going to end up being placed in our home. And that's where, if today you're starting to go please don't let this be me, that you want me to do this, there may be another child's home falling apart that he has planned for your family. So we started fostering, but in our foster parent training classes, a lady that taught us to be foster parents, she was agnostic, and we were in classes. I was like, oh my gosh, you should come to my church and tell them about this need. And she's like, oh, I've been to churches. Nobody shows up at my meetings. And I was like, as a person who'd grown up in the church, this was a big gut punch. And so that was the birth of the South Texas Alliance for Orphans. And our heart is to mobilize the church to go into this really, really dark segment of our community where the enemy is having a field day with kids. And so we help churches step into that. We help individuals step into that in a variety of ways. And like Jared said, it's shining a light in dark places. Not everyone is going to do the same thing by far, but everyone can do something. And so there's a lot of ways to get involved. So don't hear that foster care is your only lane. There'll be a few crazy of you that jumped in the deep end like Rachel and I did. But there are also a lot of other opportunities to not only support foster families, but to support birth families, kinship families, adoptive families, caseworkers, become a CASA advocate. There's lots of ways to get involved and serve.
Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate all you do. Agnes Hubbard, Hilton Daily Bread, tell us about you, how you got into this.
Well, really, it was the brainchild of my husband, and I found myself saying yes, and that's a story in of itself. But we looked around the community 23 years ago, and there really wasn't a lot in the way of helping people in poverty. And so we started a kind of a unique model of blending food banking with collaboration with the local church. And you've heard that this morning, how it really is about relationships. And I love your sermon this morning because it just finishes all of our sentences, which poverty alleviation is more about a new relationship and an identity crisis than it is just about money. And so if you look around in America, you wonder why just throwing money at poverty doesn't really help it. And so we started this model of being a toolbox for the blend of food banking and collaboration with the local church to start mentoring programs for adults and children to break the cycle of poverty, but undergirded by the gospel. And really the biggest tool that anybody brings is the gospel to those homes. And so we help churches start programs. We support them with case management, training, and ongoing support. We also, I guess people don't really know this, but we're also a no-fee food bank to all the nonprofits in an 8-county area. So we serve over 125 nonprofits that can shop at the food bank for free. So there's so many different things that you can do, from things in the food bank end of it to things with the mentoring programs. And we're just seeing an incredible spike of families in need since COVID. We're already at our 2019 numbers, end of year numbers, and it's only August. So it's just a record time with inflation, and we're all feeling it. But when you live on a margin that is, by the time I get to the end of the month, I might have $20, a 30 or 40% increase in your rent, which has gone on, food prices, gas prices, sends you into a very bad financial situation. So we're seeing numbers and people that have never even asked for help ever in their lifetimes, and they're having to learn how to navigate poverty. But we, the church, need to step up. I mean, I'm hearing that from both of these ladies. We're the answer. We are the answer to that problem, the church, and alleviating poverty in our area.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So when you came in, you got a card, and they're kind of lined up right here. You see Vault, South Texas Alliance, Silicon Daily Bread. Again, my job is to make you from unaware to aware, and that's what I really wanted to do. So go to their websites, go to our website. All their information is on our website, their website, to kind of hear what's going on more, and you might be surprised at what God might do. Last, I'd love to hear, what are you excited about what's coming up, and how can we as a church be praying for you?
Yes. Having just had that shoe drop event last Sunday, it was very exciting for me. Having 9 years ago is when we started Vault, and in 2021 was the first time anyone started getting paid to work there. And this year we've been able to hire 2 more people. And so that is extremely exciting because we're building capacity for what's coming. I looked around and I was like, we have like 100 volunteers, and I maybe know 5% of them. And that is very exciting to me, because for so long you were just begging your friends to help, and so to see that this organization and this ministry is, other people are bought into it and supporting and getting their hands dirty, actually helping kids, not dirty, whoa, there were shoes, but like helping kids, like face to face, helping kids get shoes on, that is very exciting to us. And we have multiple events throughout the year that are like that. But on a daily basis, we get to see these families. I always say there's tons of tears in our building. Sometimes there are tears of joy, like they're so grateful, and other times it's just this exhaustion and desperation. Yeah. But either way, we get to see people leave with smiles, and so that's exciting. As far as how you can be praying, we want to continue to build capacity. We get requests from all over the state. We are not able to serve all over the state. We currently are serving all of Region 8, which is Bexar County and 27 counties surrounding it. So those 27 counties, some people drive 2.5 hours to come and get bunk beds for their kids, or whatever, because they're dealing with a lot of low income challenges, and they don't have the resources in these small counties. So we are hoping and trying to build capacity to be able to be an even better resource to those rural counties. And then, I was telling Jennifer, our prayer is also that more families are stepping up for these kids. Yeah. Like that will always be our prayer, because our main motivation is for kids to be in safe, loving homes, not being abused again in foster care, but being in homes where the state is paying the church to disciple their kids. Like, that's what we are always praying for, and we want to be there and ready for that influx of people that's going to come in.
Awesome. Thank you. Jennifer?
Yes, so when I started fostering, we felt like we were on an island. Nobody was really doing this, and then nobody really knew anything about it. Rachel and I kind of started similarly close. Anyways, it was just a bunch of drowning people serving drowning people, which is not a super great plan. But now, here we are in 2023, and when the Alliance officially launched in 2016, there were like 5 churches doing anything, and today we have 98 churches doing something in the foster adopt space, which is far beyond anything I thought was going to happen. So that's the exciting stuff. We've also added, so we have church engagement, community engagement, and now we've recently added business engagement as a piece, because I would do these type of events, go outside, and men and women would come up and be like, I own restaurants. How can I use a restaurant? I own a plumbing company. How can I use my plumbing company? So now we have an intentional business engagement piece, so that businesses, whether you're, because I had a guy who was like, listen, I'm in my 50s. I'm about to be an empty nester. I'm not taking in any more kids, but I have, this business to give back. And so we found a way for him to utilize his business to serve in this space. So that's the exciting new stuff coming up, is with the business engagement. As far as prayer, we have a pastors gathering we're going to do out here in Kendall County. We've got our 5th one in Bexar County. Just that God and the Holy Spirit would move on church leaders' hearts, pastors' hearts, that they would see this, because this is God's heart, that it's going to be their church's heart, and that they would do stuff like the Bridge is doing and First Baptist here in town are doing, and mobilize their people to step into this space. And so that's our prayer.
Yep.
Yes, we also are building capacity right now. We've been working on that for the last 3 years. This is one of the fastest growing regions in the United States. And along with the economy and what's happening with finances with everybody, we're gaining population. And our services have to keep up with that. And we have been working on a capital campaign, and we are in the process of building a new building for a training center. As I said, we train churches and equip them to do sustainable, effective relational outreach programs. And those teams and all of the mentors and everybody, we do ongoing training. So we're excited about this new building, what it's going to do for the community. We also host about 5,000 volunteers a year through the ministry. So just having a place right now, we don't have any meeting space at all. Also, we're expanding our Stand By Me program, which is our mentoring program for at-risk students. And we will be able to use that building, and we're retrofitting that little red building off to the side, if you've ever been out there, to be fully a Stand By Me building. We'll do what's called Real Life, which is getting these kids ready for adulthood that are just living in poverty. And that program has a 100% graduation rate out of that program for those kids. And we're just excited to see people here. I know a lot of you have come out and volunteered, and we're excited about being able to meet the needs of our community in the future.
Hey, I just want to say thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for seeing that need and stepping in faith. And I'm going to continue to pray. We'll continue to pray that God continues to provide, and that you will shine that light as you push back the darkness. We're here as supporters of you. Would you do me a big favor and thank these 3 ladies for all they do? Good job. Yeah. As you go out, they have a table set up in the lobby. I'd love for you to get to have some time. If not, if you're trying to get out, go to their website, see what all's there. Would love for you to get a little bit more information. So why don't we just go to heaven at the moment of conversion? Like, why doesn't he just take us there? Because we have a mission. It's to bear fruit, to push back the darkness with the gospel, to shine bright. That's what God has called us to do. And while we're here, we have a job to do. And the best part of my job is knowing the conversations you're about to have on the drive home. Because I think God probably put something on your heart that I'm supposed to shine bright here. I'm supposed to reach out and talk to this group here, this neighbor here. I just know that God is beginning to stir in your heart to do something. We're here to support you and love you. But know this, ultimately, we care for the physical needs because we believe the ultimate need is spiritual. That we desperately need Jesus, and the only hope for every person is Jesus Christ. Though we are all sinful and our sin separates us from God, God made a way for us to be in right relationship with him again. That way is Jesus. Through his death and resurrection, Jesus was the perfect sacrifice for our sins. And God promises that all who place their faith in Jesus Christ will be saved.